All right, hello everyone. My name is Sean and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Sean.
Welcome to the first Southwestern Area Conference of Young People and Alcoholics Anonymous. Please join me in a moment of silence to do with as you wish. Please silence your cell phones. The main speaker meetings as well as panels are being recorded. Whoever you're talking to will be with us after the meeting. So a moment of silence. All right, thank you. The first thing I would like to do is thank the committee for allowing this meeting. This is a bit unusual within Alcoholics Anonymous. I had the opportunity to be in San Francisco a few years ago at the International Conference of Young People in AA and attended a meeting of the same title, The Doctor's Opinion. Those of you who are familiar or perhaps unfamiliar with AA history, there was a tradition in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous to have individuals who were friends of Alcoholics Anonymous but not alcoholics themselves come to functions of Alcoholics Anonymous and present on the subject of alcoholism. That practice continued well into the 1950s, and then because we had become such a strong organization and had developed our own stories of recovery, it was pretty much discontinued. Then, at the SWACYPAA that I had attended, I got to see this practice reemerge, and what had happened was a physician who was not an alcoholic from Vancouver came down and presented on some science. And it was fascinating to me, and it prompted much conversation among my friends who were also in recovery. And I let Jonathan know that I would be honored to have the privilege to help facilitate something like that at a conference here in Salt Lake City. I guess I should say a little bit about, I'm not going to say a lot about me. I said my name is Sean and I am an alcoholic. I took my last drink on March 16th of 1980. That was a month and 6 days after my 16th birthday. I just turned 50. I haven't had a drink since. I'm very grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. My service resume, as Kathy McCabe said, my service resume is also nauseating. And so I won't bore you with that. What I do want to do, though, is introduce our very distinguished friend, Dr. Alexandre Laudet, and I'm going to read some of her bio. Alexandre B. Laudet, PhD, is an internationally recognized expert in addiction recovery. Her federally funded research in the past 15 years has focused on elucidating what helps people with drug and or alcohol problems quit drinking and getting high, and how they stay in recovery. A social psychologist, her main goals are to build the science of recovery and to help translate findings into service and policy that create opportunities for long-term recovery and improved quality of life for people with substance problems. She leads the Center for Study of Addictions and Recovery at the National Development and Research Institutes, NDRI, and provides training and consultancy to government and community-based agencies on promoting opportunities for sustained recovery. She regularly publishes in peer-reviewed journals, presents at national and international conferences, and serves on the editorial board of several scientific publications. I am a little bit familiar with some of Dr. Laudet's published articles. I'm very pleased to ask her to come and join us.
I'm shorter than Sean. Okay. Are you going to hear this? Okay, I'm going to give you your little thingy back over there, because I'm not going to read it again. I'm a little bit afraid of saying my name because you're going to do that pelvic thrust thing. So I'm not going to say anything, but Basically, I consider myself an honorary member of your tribe because I'm not willing to be boring enough to be a normal person, but I'm not in recovery, as Sean said. I don't know how this works. Maybe like this, maybe like that, maybe not. No, okay. They were.
Yeah, the arrows should control it.
I did. Okay.
Jonathan. Support.
And see, I'm not as smart as he indicated before.
Okay.
What did you press?
Arrows.
That's what I thought. All right. So this is some disclaimer language that basically says that I'm solely responsible for what I'm going to say to you today, and my funding agency is responsible. But I want you to look at this for a minute because I want you to know that the work I do, I've had the privilege of presenting in amazing places like the White House and the UK Parliament, but I'm much more honored to present here today. I want to thank Jonathan and Sean, because I get taxpayers' money to do research, to get your stories, hundreds of stories of people like yourselves all over the world, and I have the privilege of being able to try to translate this into something that's taken somewhat seriously, because we're in a society that stigmatizes addiction to the point where if you say it, people may not listen, but because I have a couple of doctorates and federal funding, if I say it, people are going to unfortunately take it more seriously. And so I take all the experiences, what people in recovery tell me all over the world, and I try to translate that into stuff that people in the drug czar's office and at different offices and service development folks will take seriously. So this is about you guys, and this presentation is on my iPad, which is in my bag, and I'll gladly email it to anyone who wants it at the end. And if you have any questions, hopefully you can wait till the end. If you think, I've had staff telling me you don't know what the F you're talking about because you're not in recovery, and that's okay too, because they have a point in a way. So if you feel that way, you can come at the end and tell me that as well, that's all right. So without further ado, we're going to start. This is a rabbit who parked himself in front of my gear in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and I like him because it means you need to open your ears and turn off your cell phones. So these are some of the folks I've been privileged of having the... Oh, how cool, the dog is coming. I didn't know that. Is he in recovery? She's an alcoholic. Okay, that's good. All right. I just wanted the tape to know that the cute dog had walked in the room. All right. So some of those names you may know. Bill White is a big recovery guru guy. Kitty Harris started the collegiate recovery programs, which I'll tell you some more about a little while from then. Ken Winters has done another study on addiction among young people and adolescents. And most of the people I love and all the people I value working with are in recovery. So thank you all, even if you didn't have anything to do with this. Ooh, this is not going to look very good. Okay, well, we're going to make that do, I guess. So the first thing I want to show you, now the interesting thing is I don't see my slide on the screen, but okay. I've asked a bunch of people, 385 people to be exact, why they seek recovery. This was a study I did in New York. And this stuff isn't going to surprise you, but I'm just showing you all these numbers, by the way, to show you that whatever experiences you've had, you're not alone. Hundreds of thousands of people all over the world in recovery from drug and alcohol have the same experiences. And I think that's a valuable thing for people in recovery to know when they feel stigmatized or ostracized somehow in society. So, not surprisingly, people seek recovery because they don't like where their life is going and they want something better for themselves. So, when I've asked people in recovery what prompted them and what helped them initiate and sustain recovery, the support of peers and family is one of the most escalating consequences of use, of course, is getting arrested, losing one's job, losing one's marriage, being afraid to die, one's health falling down, stuff like that. Here, particularly, the support of peers, families, and friends, and also become a responsible parent. In other words, kind of like growing up and having people help you try to get your life together. So these slides look very strange. All right. The promise of recovery now, I shouldn't say that on the microphone, but a judge had, there was some court things about pornography, and a judge had said, I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And recovery is very much the same for people in recovery. You know whether you're in recovery or not, you know whether your friends are in recovery or not. The majority of the rest of the world does not know what recovery means. When surveys are done at the general public level, people say the answer people choose the most often is recovery means that somebody is trying to stay sober, which really implies that they think you're going to relapse any minute. And not only is that not true, but it also has consequences in terms of whether they want to hire you, rent you an apartment, give you a student loan, and all kinds of other stuff. So because of that, there's been some efforts in my field of addiction and in the service field of addiction. SAMHSA, which you'll hear me mention several times, is a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a federal agency that pays for all publicly funded treatment programs in the United States, and they also design and suggest models of treatment. So this is a SAMHSA definition, a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So that's kind of what people strive for. I mean, I'm not in recovery, I'm sort of striving for this myself. So that definition was a little vague. So in 2005, it was published a year later, these two things, but in 2005, we got together with CSAP, which is the branch of SAMHSA that administered substance use, because SAMHSA also does mental health. And we came up with the first definition of recovery that was, there were people in recovery in the room, there were policymakers, there were clinicians, there were researchers, and we came up with a definition that says recovery from alcohol and drugs is a process of change through which an individual achieves abstinence and improved health, wellness, and quality of life. And then a year later, a bunch of us gathered at the Betty Ford Center as part of the Betty Ford Institute, and we were mostly the same kind of broad panel of folks. And we said recovery from substance dependence, a voluntarily maintained lifestyle characterized by sobriety, personal health, and citizenship. We didn't like the word citizenship. The UK government adopted that definition for their UK drug policy, their drugs house office over there, and they use social engagement instead of citizenship, but basically it means like to be a good citizen, pay taxes, and be responsible and stuff. So the first thing that shows you is that contrary to what we've been looking at in my field of addiction treatment and services, recovery is not just being clean and sober. It's a better life, because I showed you. You want to come up on the stage? Oh, sure. Oh, come on, that would be fun. As long as she doesn't pee on my leg. Okay, that's good. This is important because, again, I told you when the general public thinks of addiction, they say people are trying to stay clean. And really, it's a lot more than that. So the real experts for me, of course, are people like yourselves who are in recovery, and I've done extensive work among people in recovery, asking them an open-ended question we call, which is, so what does recovery mean to you? And my favorite definition, and there's a lot more detail about all of this in the handouts that I'm happy to email you, because otherwise I could go for 2 years. But my definition of recovery is life, because I didn't have no life before I got into recovery. This was a black guy who had been a crack addict for about 20 years. He was on welfare. He spent most of his life in jail. And that's my favorite definition, because that's what I feel that I'm charged with trying to inform policy and services to give you guys the resources and tools to achieve, according to your definition, not what society wants you to be, but what you want to be. But we have to be able to know what it is to give you the tools to get there. So with that in mind, when people come into treatment, I've asked people, what is important to you right now? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish out of being here? And most people are mandated into treatment. So, of course, the first thing they say, well, I want to get clean and sober, I want to complete treatment. But that's not the only thing they say. They want to get work, they want to get education to get work. A lot of them have lost their children to child welfare, they want to get their kids back. They want more stable housing, better relationship with the family, get their life together, and complete treatment as a postscriptum, if you will. So this is not good. Well, it's not good because we only see half the slide. But, okay, anyway, when people are in recovery for some period of time, and I've done studies where people were in recovery from 1 month to over 20 years, and I've separated them out in fourth, because they fell naturally in fourth in terms of whether they were in recovery under 6 months. No, this study is in third, I'm sorry, it's a different one. under 6 months, 6 months to 18 months, 18 months to 3 years. And what you see, well, you're not going to see the full story. Jonathan, is there any way we can fix this or no? You don't think so? Okay. That's very unfortunate. All right. Anyway, the most important thing for people at all stages of recovery is what you know as recovery work. Employment is not only the second most important, but it becomes more important as recovery progresses. So early on, as we know, in the first 6 months, people are mostly focused on trying to stay clean and sober. But after that, they start thinking, I have to get a job, I have to get a house, I have to maybe go back to school. And, relationships with family and friends, education and training to get the job, of course, normal life, which sounds so boring to me, but for people who've had a very chaotic life during their whole active addiction, having a normal life probably sounds pretty good. So, so now the question becomes, given that these are people's priorities and goals and definitions, is it the case that being clean and sober actually gets you there? So does quitting lead to a better life? So when I ask people in recovery what is good about, or what would be good if they're not yet in recovery, indeed you can see it. They say you get a second chance at life, you have a clear head, meaning like you wake up remembering what you did the day before, you're working on yourself, you have direction and goals, and you have all of this better attitude, better living condition, better health, better family life, having friends. And there are a few other things down, but you see all the top ones here anyway. So, you know the promises, which I'm not going to read because I'm trying to go through the whole thing as fast as I can. So I did something with the Faces and Voices of Recovery last year called the Life in Recovery Survey. Maybe some of you in the room took the survey. He took the survey, and she took the survey. And the reason why I wanted to do this is that I realized that trying to convince policymakers to abolish the 3,000 or so pieces of legislation at the federal, local, and state level that represent obstacles to people in recovery to regain their lives, like getting student loans and housing and stuff, telling them people in recovery are going to be happier is not going to sell it, because until it's a child of theirs or their family member, they don't really care, unfortunately. So we have to get them in the pocketbook, right? At the DC level particularly. So to get the people in the pocketbook, I figure we have to start quantifying the benefits of recovery, not just to the individual, because nobody really seems to care about this, unfortunately, but in terms of the nation's health and economy, right? So I thought, well, let's look at what people experience when they're in active addiction and how their life changes once they're in recovery. So we did this online survey for 2 months on the Faces and Voices Recovery website, and we got 3,200 people who were in recovery anywhere from a month to 35 years. And so this is the description of what we did. So I'm going to show you, so I wanted to look at the domains. I showed you a slide before that showed what people's priorities were. So we developed items to tap these particular priorities because I wanted to see, it's basically like, you know, when people share the stories in meeting, they tell you how their life used to be and what it is now. Right? So that's what I wanted to look at, is how was their life in the past in terms of these domains where their priorities are in recovery, and how it is now that they're in recovery. So the first one we're going to look at is family and social life. And as you can see, we had people in, so the orange bar for everyone is while they were actively using, and then the other bars are under 3 years in recovery, 3 to 10 years, and over 10 years. Now, parenthetically, there are very few research studies on people in long-term recovery because my field is more comfortable going to other professionals and recruiting in treatment. I don't really do that personally because I don't think that's where recovery happens, but most people do that. So most studies we have on addiction and recovery is really people they're still using or just in treatment and they've been there like 2 months. And to me, that's not very interesting because I spared you the story about how I fell in this field, but I fell in this field by accident, and I realized at that point that everybody, the outcome that people were looking at was relapse, which I thought was a real bummer because I moved to the US from France because France is specializes in when you have an idea to tell you, oh, you can't do that, it's going to be complicated and stuff. And I tend to see the dream and the vision, and whether it's possible or not doesn't really concern me. I just want to go for it. So I was more interested in what people who are doing well. Like, let's look at people who are doing well and how they got there. To me, that was interesting. And to my enormous surprise, I realized nobody had ever done that. So here we are. So now, the family and social level, what you see, so these are, I know this is very small letters. This is participated in family activities, voted, that's our citizenship thing at the Betty Ford Center, regained child custody from protective services, and volunteered in the community. So not surprisingly, the orange bars are short because, except for the regained custody, because most people you will see in another thing, they lost custody more than regained. But what you see basically, what I want you to take home for the 5 slides that I'm going to show you as fast as I can, is that, so these are good things, right? Positive things society look at as a good thing in people's lives. The bars get progressively longer as people are in recovery longer, right? So we have the family and social life. You have the finances. So plan for the future. Look at the difference. You have about 22 people planning for the future financially in active addiction, and about 90% in recovery. And the other message I want you to take from these slides is that not only is it a drastic change, I'm going to say improvement, between active addiction and long-term and recovery, but it keeps getting better. So people's lives continue improving from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years to 20 years. So, in other words, the sky's the limit, and you will be amazed before you're through, is what they said in the book, right? So, health, positive health, good nutrition, exercise, having a doctor, getting regular checkup, taking care of one's health. Again, very short bars in active addiction, which means low engagement in these activities. And what? What? It's true. I know. I'm glad. This is good. Employment. Started my own business, furthered my education, got positive job performance, steadily employed. Again, you see all of these amazing improvements that keep improving in every particular question we asked, right? I think there's one more. Legal. Now legal. Legal you see in reverse, because people have usually a lot more problems, except I've phrased it differently. So had no involvement. So only about 38% people had no involvement with the criminal justice system. And this is not, I should say by the way, because this is not just alcohol. This is people that had alcohol and drugs, or alcohol or drugs. I don't remember the exact details, but it's in the longer presentation. Not just alcohol. So no involvement. A growing number of people have no criminal justice involvement in recovery. More and more people get off probation. After a while, it stops, but that's probably because people are no longer on probation once they've been in recovery for over 10 years. Restored profession, hopefully. Restored professional license, got driver's license back, expunged criminal record. So these are all good things, right? And I think there's one more, but I'm wrong. Okay. Now that's my favorite slide, except there's a piece over there that's missing, but I'll tell you what it is. So I asked 354 people in recovery when they started in the study, which they were in recovery anywhere from 1 month to 10 years at the time, and I asked them, overall, how satisfied are you with your life, which is a standardized question from the World Health Organization, and how stressed are you in the past year? Right? So now at the bottom, and you can't see the bottom because of the setup, but I showed you before the thing where we had people in recovery under 6 months, 6 months to 18 months, and 18 months to 3 years or more. And this is what these things are here. So the people in 6 months or less in recovery are here in terms of quality of life, and they're here in terms of stress. And this is 18 months, so you can see stress decreases dramatically. Now, you all know that stress is the #1 relapse predictor, obviously. So the fact that stress decreases is a really good thing. And it's very important because most people in addiction relapse because of stress, because for years the only coping strategies they've had to deal with stress is to use or to do something unhealthy. So if your stress level goes down, it's very good, particularly if you get more and more happy with your life. And it continues going up, quality of life, and stress continues going down. So basically, what we're deriving from this is that recovery is sobriety plus improved quality of life. Now, I've been trying to sell the quality of life or happiness idea to my field for a long time, and people are not that interested because I think it doesn't seem like something the public cares about. Up until recently, the two things the public cared about was what we call public health and safety, which means as long as you're not committing crime and transmitting diseases, we're good. You know, that's what methadone is all about, right? Unfortunately, that's not recovery. So the part we miss the most is this. And in the absence of this, you guys are going to lose that. So you're going to lose the whole recovery thing. So here is a slide that I put in the context of drug and alcohol. And upstairs, I have it in the context of people who don't use drug and alcohol but like to fit in their jeans. So I've done a couple of studies where I've looked at people's level of quality of life and how they were doing over time. And basically it goes like this. There are studies that show that when people are actively using, their quality of life satisfaction is lower than that of patients who are on a waiting list for a heart transplant. Which means basically when you're actively using, after a number of years, your life sucks. I shouldn't say that on tape, but it does, right? Initially, it could be good, but after that, it's not so good. So then you stop using, and hopefully, things start to improve. I just showed you a bunch of slides that show that things start to improve. That gives you something that you don't want to lose. So then if you have some stress or somebody offers you drugs or alcohol or say you want to get in the van or I don't know whether Steve B is here, like, you know, get in the van and there were going to be girls and weed and stuff, right? You may say no because you're going to think, you know, well, I already have, you know, I'm starting to feel a little more secure. I have a job. I have a girlfriend or something. The idea of quality of life came to me when we were asking a bunch of guys in recovery in one of my studies what they drew on in terms of strength and resilience when they were tempted to use. And this one guy said, well, he was in recovery like 8 months, and he said something like, well, I started talking to my family again. I have a room in an SRO, a single room occupancy kind of residence. I'm going back to my driver's license for trucks, DL or whatever license it's called. And I'm not going to go back to using because I don't want to go through that madness no more. And I know that if I used, I would lose everything. And so I actually have a scientific paper called Don't Want to Go Through That Madness No More, the importance of quality of life in promoting addiction recovery, because to me that's what it is. If we don't help people improve their lives in ways that are meaningful to them, they will go back out. Sobriety alone will not, in my view. It's sort of like taking a crutch off of an invalid and say, let me see you dance. It's not going to happen. We're going to have to give you something else to make you want to dance without going back to the crutch, which is what addiction is, in my view. So, addiction careers, these are not surprises to you. This color is not showing very well on that screen. I've asked people in recovery how many periods they had of being clean and sober for a month or longer outside of being in jail or in the hospital because it's easier there, although maybe not. And then went back out. And in other words, how many relapses they had before what they call their current recovery. And as you can see, it goes, so 71% people said they had one or more relapse before their current recovery. And what you can see is that 50% of people, and these were people who, their mean age in that study was 42 and a half. So these are folks who are older than you are, and I hope that you will not be in the 71% so that you can just never have a relapse, God willing. But without programs like what you guys are part of, a lot of people will have these relapse cycles, and 50% of people have had 4 or more of these up and down, in and out, you know, of the wagon and on the wagon episodes. And the same for treatment, by the way, because as you all know, addiction's a chronic brain disease, but we're currently treating it like a broken leg. We give you 30 days of treatment, and then we say good luck to you. And if you relapse, it's kind of your fault, right? We don't do that with diabetes because we'd be sued if we did this. But that's what we do now with addiction. So the majority of people have had a lot more than one treatment episode, not surprisingly. And I hate to say this in front of Sean and Mary Jo because you're in the treatment world, but I'm thinking that they have a nice little business model going on there, because they know you're going to come back if they keep giving you the kind of treatment they're giving you, which is really not nice. But I'm not exactly sure that's not the thinking behind some of it, you know. So, all right. So for a lot of people, we have this relapse cycle, which looks better on a PC than on a Mac, I guess. But you know, this is how it happens. And of course, as the more this happens, it's become chronic dependence. And as you know, a chronic condition is a lot more difficult to treat the longer it's not addressed. So this looks very bad as well. But at least we get the gist of it. So I showed you a slide showing you before that 71% of people in that particular study had one or more relapses. And so I asked these people what they had learned from these relapse experiences, because relapse is really not a failure. It's just it's not a requirement, but in my view, it's an accident along the way. And if you have it, you try to learn as much as you can from it. So I asked these people what they had learned from the relapse experience to try to solidify their recovery the next time. And the majority of people, you have to seek help and support. You have to talk about your problems, which is what you guys are doing in groups like this. You have to stay focused. You have to keep recovery as the priority. Don't use no matter what. Stay focused. You have to distract yourself, and you have to meditate and pray. So now let's look a little bit. I didn't want to show you tons of research about 12-step because I assume you guys know more about 12-step than I ever will, but I wanted to put it in context of this kind of research. So as you know, 12-step participation fosters stable abstinence, and so this is completely wasted because we don't see the bottom of it. But somebody came up with a study where they looked at engagement in 12-step, not just making meetings, but also working the program, if you will, and they abstracted the 3 ingredients, if you will, of 12-step involvement that really sustains recovery over time. And that was considering yourself a member of a 12-step fellowship, doing step work, and going to meetings. And you can see this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but basically what it showed is that people at baseline of a study, when they started in a study, who engaged, the more they engaged in these 3 behaviors, the more likely they were to remain clean and sober a year later. But that's not news to you, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So this is good because we can see it. I like that. Sustained abstinence over 3 years. So now we're looking at 3 years. And what you see is that people who went to meetings, now usually what we consider regular attendance in my field is once a week or more. That's not to say you can't go more often, but it's considered like the minimum dosage that if you go less than a week, usually people don't do as well. So continuous abstinence once a week or more for 3 years, 51% people were likely to remain abstinent, whereas people who were going less often, only 14%. So if you needed more evidence, there you go. Now this is interesting because this shows the likelihood. So these are called odds, which is a statistical term that means likelihood, right? And of course, the bigger number of the odds or the likelihood means the more likely whatever. It's like when if you play horses or something, right? So the role of continuous 12-step attendance once a week or more again, and involvement over 3 years on the likelihood that people are going to remain sober for 3 years. So this is 12-step attendance, making meetings, and this is 12-step involvement. I have 9 items for 12-step involvement, like having a home group, reading the literature, working the steps, having a sponsor, hanging out with people before meetings, setting up meetings, and doing service and that kind of stuff. So overall, in the 354 people were 6 times more likely to remain clean and sober for 3 years if they went to meetings and were involved in 12-step. That should tell you something. Now, the important thing I think you all know that early recovery obviously is the most vulnerable to relapse because you don't have the tools yet. Hello. And people in early recovery are 8 times more likely to stay clean and sober for 3 years if they make meetings regularly, which I think is a nice thing to show. And they're also almost 7 times more likely to stay sober if they work the program. But amazingly, you see the importance of meeting attendance decreases with recovery duration, but the importance of working the program goes up, which is important. Because a lot of people who have like 10 or 15 years may go to meetings less often than once a week. But they continue working the program, and they probably engage in more service and sponsorship and that kind of stuff. So in terms of how 12-step can help in early recovery, your common relapse triggers in different studies is cravings and urges, people having extra time because they used to chase the drug and then take the drug and then get off the drug and then chase money to get the drug and stuff. Lonely, bored, no one to hang out with who's sober because the old friends are still using. Depressed and stressed. So these are all of the relapse triggers that are very commonly shared across studies. And this is what 12-step can help you do in terms of, if you remember the slide I showed you about the strategies people say were helpful to ward off a relapse after a craving or a temptation. Share about your problems or your feelings in meetings, go to meetings and get involved, service, talking to other people, getting phone numbers, get numbers, make coffee. Does it say date? Oh yeah, well, I'm sorry, never mind.
We do that too.
Yes, I know, that's the 13th step. Share about it in meetings and talk to other members and identify and learn, because some people, I think it was the lady who spoke the first night, your friend Katie or what? Kathy, who said something about she went to meetings and everybody had gray hair and something wrong with their socks. So you can't really identify in a room like that. You have to go to meetings of people with whom you can identify, whether it has to do with your age or your sexual orientation or your racial background or your language or the substance you used or whatever. If you cannot identify the people in the room with you, chances are you're not going to keep coming. And if you don't keep coming, you're not going to, get as much advantage of that. So now, it works if you work it, because one of the problems with 12-step, it's not the problem with 12-step, it's a problem with the people, but is that the majority of people stop going, or they don't go at all because they've heard all kinds of stuff that aren't true, but they've heard them and they're still in denial, so it's like a really nice excuse to hang your hat on. It's like, well, I'm not going to that. So when I ask people in drug treatment programs what they think and feel about 12-step, this is rated from 0 to 10, but I'm just showing you the end of the axis because that's where all of the findings cluster. So most people think 12-step is helpful, it's important as part of treatment, and it's important overall as part of the recovery process. So people generally in treatment, and as you know, I think 85% of treatment programs in the United States incorporate some 12-step tenets, depending on the program. But even if it's a cognitive behavioral thing, usually there are meetings or they recommend you go to meetings, because by default right now, that's the only form of recovery support we have after treatment, whether that's good or bad. This is not showing up very well, but when I ask people who are involved in AA or NA, and I've looked at them separately, but it doesn't make much of a difference, why they go because it promotes sobriety, and they go for the support, the acceptance, and the fellowship, which isn't a surprise. But now here's the problem. When I ask people who come into treatment, whether they've ever gone to 12-step or whether they're going right now, what you have is 19% have never gone. And these are usually people who've never been in treatment before. So 59% are going, I don't know if you can see the number, 23% disengaged, which means they went and they stopped. Now, I showed you the addiction career and I showed you the treatment career about the people having the in and out and the relapse and the sobriety and in at treatment, out of treatment. Now, this is a 12-step career. This is people's pattern of going to 12-step for a while, stopping. going again, stopping. Now, chances are this overlaps with the treatment career, by the way, because when they're in treatment, sometimes it's part of the treatment or a requirement to be in 12-step, or they're on probation and they have to go to 12-step as part of their probation, and then they're done, and it's like, okay, I got the program, I got it, I got the message, I don't have to go anymore. So the majority of people, 50% of people who have ever gone to 12-step have stopped going at least 3 times and gone again. So obviously I showed you data before that shows that continuous participation is what drives prolonged abstinence. So if people stop going, chances are it's not going to be as helpful, right? Now, since you first started attending 12-step, have you ever stopped? So again, so this is A and NA. It's similar to what I showed you before. I showed you reasons why people go, and the career part. Now, here it is. So, how many different times have you stopped attending for a month longer and began attending again? So, the majority of people said 6 times, which is a lot of times. This is a different study from the one before. And how long was the longest interruption in attendance? This is about 2.5 years. So so that's probably a relapse period, right? So since we know that unfortunately relapse is not uncommon. So this is the likelihood of staying abstinent. This is a pattern of 12-step attendance as a function of time among people in long-term recovery. So these bars here are how long people were in recovery. This is the people who were in recovery 6 months or under. This is the 6 to 18, and this is everybody together. So as you can see, attendance declines over time, and if the screen was working, the arrow would be kind of pointing in the other direction. Now here is this is always funny to me. So I've shown you data showing that the majority of people stop attending more than once. So I've asked them why they stopped attending, and that's NA on the left and A on the right. And really, I apologize for it looking like this on the PC. It doesn't look that way at all. It's more lined up. So the main reason why people stop going to NA and to A is I'm using it and not ready to stop, right? Obviously. The second reason is I didn't like it or I'm tired of it. And the third reason is I don't need it, I can recover on my own. And then there are a bunch of other reasons, including no reason. And time or location. Well, we know there's like A and NA meetings probably almost around the clock in most places. So time and location is not that good an excuse, because chances are if your life depends on it, you'll find the time and the location to go, right? So now this sounds familiar because this I'm using and I'm not ready to quit and I can do it on my own. Because I showed you this slide before that showed that people who've had relapses, what they've learned from the relapse experiences, you cannot do it alone, you have to seek support, and you have to make recovery a priority. But people are saying, well, I'm really not ready to stop. So what they're telling us is I'm not motivated, and even if I were motivated, I don't need 12-step, I can do it on my own. And of course, we know that doesn't usually work. So the observation and the clinical hint for anybody interested in clinical services is what people say is you must want to recover, and you're not going to be able to do it on your own. And people stop going because they're not ready to recover and they think they can do it on their own. So for clinical purposes, what we need is we need to help people find their motivation to enter recovery as early as possible, because of course lives become more and more devastated as active addiction progresses. And people need to recognize the need for accepting support and seeking support, because most people will say, well, I've put myself in that situation and I'm going to get myself out of that situation on my own. And it's like the old Home Depot commercial. You can do it, we can help. You don't have to do it alone, right? And that's what the 12-step programs are there for. So this doesn't look good either. But so now I wanted to finish this thing with showing you some data about young people in recovery. I have a federally funded study to look at a new trend emerging nationwide called the collegiate recovery programs, which are peer-driven recovery support models, services, but it's not really services because it's peer support on college campuses, so that somebody who's in recovery and who's young, it's usually young people, but not always, most of the time it is. Some people who's in recovery and is young, if they go to college where there's that much partying going on campus, can be somewhat secure that they're not going to be surrounded by a culture where everybody parties, and to be accepted and fit in, you're going to have to get drunk at the football game, otherwise you're not going to have any friends. It gives them a bunch of buddies, sober buddies to hang out with, and there's usually a little room or a little building or something like that where they can go and hang out and play games and decompress. Some of the programs have small staff with professional counseling and stuff like that, but it's mostly peer-driven. And I don't know if I have the growth slide on here. Yeah. So there were 4 of these in 2000. There's currently 45 of them nationwide. And I presented the data at the conference 2 weeks ago at Augsburg College in Minnesota. And every year it almost doubles. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. The drug czar was there, who's in recovery, Michael Botticelli. The deputy drug czar was there. The head of the White House recovery branch guy, Peter Gomez, in recovery, was there as well. It's a really inspiring thing to see young people who are in recovery and say, thank God because of this program, I'm graduating law school or medical school, because what that means is that the future generation, people who are in recovery and professionals, which are opportunities that they may not have had otherwise, because people may have thought, well, if I go to college, there's going to be all of this drinking and I'm going to lose my sobriety. And then you have to choose, do I want to be sober or do I want to be educated? Nobody should have to make that choice. They're going to be practicing medicine or law or whatever they're going to be practicing with the framework that addiction is a disease and you can recover from it. So once they become policymakers or doctors or teachers or whatever, instead of looking at people with addiction with stigma, they're going to look at them with compassion and say, hey, I was there, I did it, you can do it, here are the tools. So that's really going to change the world as far as I'm concerned. So I love that program. And so these are only a few slides from this particular study. There's more of it on the web, but this is the characteristics. So you see they're 26, so they're a little bit older, but it's also because 13% of them are graduate students. So these are the demographics. And by the way, these kids have higher retention rate, graduation rates, and GPA than the student body at any institution that they are. The universities love them because they graduate, they don't cause any trouble, they're not doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So, and they will become alumni and probably contribute money to the institution. So universities are really very keen on this, and one thing I would like to see happen is every one of the top party schools should have one of these, because I think that would really make it change the culture. And the state of Texas, which is very forward in that way for some reason, the state of Texas has provided money to have one of these in every one of the Texas state universities and colleges, which is really amazing as far as I'm concerned, because I think that's really going to change the culture on college campuses and for future generations. So, these are kids who have had some severe, in spite of their short addiction history, and you guys will probably relate to this better than anyone. They've had some serious consequences of addiction. A third of them have been homeless. The circle should be right here, but the majority of them have been arrested. Over a third of them have been in jail as adults. Now, these are slides. I know that the talk after this one is about sex and gambling and some other things, smoking and something else. I don't remember the name. It's called Other Problems. The talk after this. I saw it on the board. Yes, thank you. Outside issues. Thank you. So these are some outside issues that I'm showing you because these are people of your age cohort, and this kind of data hasn't been really disseminated or published before, because usually in my field we tend to practice in a very silo way. Like I'm looking at mental health and he's looking at addiction and somebody else is looking at smoking, and we forget that we're looking at entire human beings, and unless you address everything at the same time, chances are if you whack something, it's going to come back up over here, and then you're going to whack it over here, and the person's still not going to be healthy and as happy and relaxed as this guy over there and the dog. So I'm sorry to hear that. 76% of these kids, 3/4 of them have been treated for mental health problems, and more than half of them have had a diagnosis. And the stress level from 1 to 10 is not too bad. 49% are currently in the past year being treated for mental health problems, and over a third are currently taking meds for mental health problems. Now, in terms of their history, this won't surprise you very much. They started, they basically did everything but everything under the kitchen sink that wasn't nailed down. And they started at a fairly young age, and they used from anywhere from 7 years for alcohol to 4 years for crack cocaine. And in terms of their primary problems, so the addiction severity is fairly high. It's 11 on a scale from 0 to 13. So even though they didn't use again for very long, they used for 6 or 7 years, at the addicted level, they still had a pretty severe history. Alcohol and drugs are primary problems, but also behavioral, which is what we're going to get into a little bit here, and then the outside issues are going to get into it some more, I guess. So behavioral addictions are something that we don't usually look at, because until healthcare reform, this has not come up very much as something that should be looked at. But I think once people see this data, they may start to realize that we really have to look at this. So again, the slide doesn't show very well, and I apologize for that, but this shows what people have considered as their addictions in addition to drug and alcohol. So the slide before, okay, I'm making an ass out of myself now, and I'm being recorded saying it. Secondary behavioral addiction, 45 or so percent people said they had one or more behavioral addictions, right? So this is the breakdown of these addictions. So you have eating, you have sex and love, self-harm and cutting, gambling, gaming, shopping, that's my favorite one, internet, and exercise, I like that one too. Now, this is lifetime, right? But here is the scary thing for me. This is current. So these are people who are currently in recovery from drug and alcohol problem. So the average addiction professional would say, this person's in recovery, we're done, they're good. But they're not good, because look at this. You have 11% people who have an eating disorder, sex and love just as much, and most people have several of those going on at once. Even though as far as everybody is concerned, they're good, because they're not using, they're going to pass it, their urines are going to be clean and everything's going to be good, but it's not good because of this. And then you have the mental health I showed you before. And then when we asked them, what do you consider yourself in recovery from? And of course, everybody thought they were just going to say drugs and alcohol. Well, the surprise is that there's a whole laundry list of stuff that people are considering themselves in recovery from. And drug treatment programs usually don't address these, right? That doesn't mean they're not there. So when people leave drug treatment program, they've addressed this at the most. They usually haven't addressed the quality of life business that I showed you before, and chances are nobody has talked about that, right? So we have some work to do in the field. Now, in terms of utilization of treatment and other recovery support, we have some 80% people who've gone to treatment, even more people who've gone to 12-step, and a smattering of people who've gone to non-12-step like Life Ring and Smart. How am I doing on time? Because people are leaving.
You've got an hour and a half total.
I thought I was.
We're at 2 o'clock right now.
Okay, I'm going to hurry up.
1 hour.
I'm going to hurry up. This is the detail of people's treatment. What amazed me is ever in an emergency room for drug and alcohol problem, ever prescribed medication, ever attended a wilderness program. There was some hoopla about that yesterday. Ever attended a recovery high school. Hopefully the number will grow, because I'm hoping that more recovery high schools will happen. and every individual counseling. Age first treatment, this is more breakdown on the treatment, which is not that interesting. Okay, now here's interesting. The form of help that was the most instrumental in starting their recovery, treatment and 12-step are neck and neck. That's interesting, right? And so participation, recent participation, as you see, very high in these young people who are in recovery and doing well in college. And now, this is interesting because it brings us back full circle to where we are at this conference here today. This is the kind of services and support that they get in the collegiate recovery program. So they have a room where they can hang out with each other at the program, at the collegiate recovery program. But of course, they also form a support network and peer network where they can go to sober activities, they can go to football games, picnics, barbecues, whatever people do at college on weekends. And some of the program have a peer advisor for academic issue, like a graduate student in recovery will provide academic advising to a junior in recovery. Seminar classes are like workshops on the nature of addiction and relapse and recovery that's provided by a counselor. CRP non-12-step meeting, like again, life-ring or some non-religious, like general celebration thing. Community service, a lot of the programs provide opportunities for the students in recovery to do some service, not just in 12-step, but like in the community or on the university, or to help at the dog shelter or at the old folks home and stuff like that, and working with a tutor, peer tutor. But when we ask people what are the most helpful components of this program, what you see is it's just the peers, right? So hanging out with the peers at the program and outside the program are by far the two things that are rated as the most helpful to recovery. So what? Well, people with substance use problems seek recovery because they want a better life, and it's sought and experienced as sobriety and improved functioning, quality of life. Most people in recovery experience other problems. There are medical problems, which I didn't show you because the data is mostly among older people younger than me, but older than you. Mental health problems and other behavioral addiction. Working on one's recovery holistically or comprehensively really requires addressing everything. And of course, it may mean that you have to seek support and services in different places because there really aren't any programs usually that keep it all together. And across study and age group, the support of peers is by far the most important, which suggests to me that Bill and Dr. Bob were onto something. So that's it. Thank you. Step down and walk.
So this was scheduled for an hour-and-a-half block.
Oh.
Dr. Laudet is willing to take some questions because we have some time.
Okay. Yeah. Or you can go have cigarettes, whatever you want to do.
Outside issues.
Okay, so I think it's like obvious that traditional treatment isn't as effective as everybody would like to see it. Is there any studies or any data that shows a different type of model or a certain way that a certain program is ran that is more effective than another treatment center, for example? Does that make sense? Like, are there different treatment models that work better than others? Is there anything that suggests there's a certain way that it works better in treatment?
Are you talking about whether 12-step works better than cognitive behavioral or motivation enhancement, or are you talking about different models?
Different models of treatment.
Well, the model right now is the acute care model, where somebody comes in crisis. It's really the broken leg model, where you're either forced into treatment or you're down on your knees and you have no other option, because we're in a model, we're an abstinence-based model in America, which is the only country in the world that has an abstinence model. Everybody else has a harm minimization problem, a harm reduction problem, where if you come because your stomach hurts, even if they know your stomach hurts because you've drank too much, they're not going to start saying, well, you know, your stomach hurts because you drank too much. They're going to treat your stomach, right? And then they're going to say, do you think, like, why do you think your stomach hurts? And they're going to get you to come to the conclusion eventually that maybe I should drink a little less or use a little less or whatever. We have a system here which is a holdback from the just say no business, right? Where it's like, until you're on your knees and ready to be abstinent, most treatment programs is just not motivated, treatment resistant. Now, it's not that the person is treatment resistant, it's that we as professionals fail to help you meet you where you're at. And I heard something great at the Collegiate Recovery Program where one of the guys was running an adventurous seminar for young people in recovery, and he said, we meet people where they're at, but we don't leave them there. That's the thing, see. It's important, once you meet the person where they're at, to help them get where they want to go, which is what we don't do. See, in the treatment field in America, you have to meet the providers where they're at. And where they're at is, well, we're going to take your urine and we're going to throw you out of treatment if you're showing to have the symptoms of the disease I'm supposed to be treating you for, right? And that doesn't work. So that model is effective in the short run, right? Which is really what we've cared about as a society was, as I said before, if you're not committing any crimes and you're not passing on diseases, we're happy, right? So we're happy to give you methadone and you spend the rest of your life on the couch, watching television, zoned out, because you're not stealing my pocketbook, so that's good, right? But that's not, I don't think that's not a recovery support, right? So now there is a model, the treatment model, which is a new paradigm, if you will, that's called Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care, or ROSC, R-O-S-C, and that's on the SAMHSA website. And the ROSC model is a series of concentric circles, if you can imagine the individual at the middle. And then you have all of the problems that we've talked about here that have to be addressed. So you have the drugs, you have the mental health, the physical health, people having lost their kids, they don't have a job, they have a criminal record, no home, and all of that. Then it represents the all of the agencies that would presumably, in an ideal world, work in coordination centered on you to give you these services. And then the three goals of these services are health, well-being, and recovery. Now, a number of states have started to implement that. The state of Connecticut, which is about the size of this room, so it's easy to turn the state around. See, I'm originally from the state of New York, and we serve 112,000 people in drug treatment every day, which is the second largest, and California is the biggest. So it's very hard to turn a system like that around, like the drug and alcohol treatment services, to make revolutions by coordinating, homeless shelters and jails and probation officers and family drug court and all of these things. To coordinate all of that is a momentous task. And then there's like who's paying for what and everything. In a small, Vermont has done it as well, because Vermont is as big as its table. So it's easier to do. Now I'm from the state of Hawaii, which would be very easy to do, but because we're like all over the place geographically, we can't get ourselves out of the paper bag either, so we haven't done it. But and also we're kind of relaxed about stuff, But recovery-oriented systems of care is really the model, and it has a very large peer-driven component, and it's also a strength-based model where you capitalize on the person's strength and resiliencies, whether it's the individual strength, their belief system, their strength. There's also strength in, is there family support, is there community support? So you don't look at the person like some kind of failure because they have an addiction. You look at the person as somebody who has a chronic disease, which is what addiction is, but they also have some strength. And you capitalize on that to get them where they want to go. That's recovery-oriented systems of care. There hasn't been a lot of research because, unfortunately, one of the reasons why people describe me as the top person in the field is that nobody else is stupid enough to do this research because the feds are really not interested in funding. Everybody likes it, but because it's more expensive than looking at rats' brains. You get a rat, you look at the brain, you do stuff to the brain, and then you sacrifice the rat, which means you kill him. And you can do all kinds of brain research study in about 6 months for not that much money. I want to follow people for 10 years because I want to know how they're doing, and that's very expensive. So people say, well, that's interesting, but it's a lot of money. So there's not a lot of research on the ROS model, but the little bit that there is shows that there is not only an enormous improvement in people's lives, but it also costs the state a lot less, which you would think, people would think, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. But it's not happening. It takes forever to change anything at the state level. And then if you start trying to change addiction services, probation services, housing, homelessness services, people just say, well, we have other priorities and it falls by the wayside.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, do you have any numbers of success rate versus traditional recovery centers versus no recovery center at all?
What do you mean by recovery center?
Like a rehab versus a non-rehab success rates in sobriety?
You mean whether people do better if they go to treatment, if they don't go to treatment?
Correct.
Well, obviously, unless you're going to have, identical twins that are addicted and you put one in rehab. I mean, you can't, somebody's either in rehab or they're not in rehab. So to do a real comparison, you would have to have two people who are the same, right? With the same addiction, so we don't have that. But we do know anecdotally, and anecdotally means we don't have a lot of scientific data, and the reason why we don't have a lot of scientific data is, as I said before, the majority of research studies that the feds like funding have to do with people in treatment, because they're easier to get. They're a captive audience, they're there. You just station yourself there for a month, you can recruit 300 people, right? So most of what we know is about treatment, but in reality, there is a lot of evidence, although not very strong scientifically, but I tend to believe it, that up to 3/4 of people recover without treatment. And I really hope that's the case, by the way, because there is something called the denial gap, whereby in any given year, at any given time, there are about 21.5 million people in America who qualify for drug and alcohol addiction, DSM-5 diagnosis. And of these people, fewer than 10% in any given year will get treatment. Over their lifetime, it's about 28% of people with alcohol and 34% of people with drug addiction will ever get treatment, right? And of the people who do not get treatment, 95% do not get treatment because they don't think they have a problem, right? But eventually, people come to the realization that they have a problem. And it is widely believed that up to 3/4 of people in America, I did a study with the Partnership for Drug for America, estimating that there are 23 million adults, US adults in recovery in the country, which we don't know anything about because nobody funded this study. Of these people, it's believed that 3/4, meaning 18 million people are in recovery who've never gone to treatment. Yes.
Does that also mean they don't participate in 12-step groups?
No, it means they haven't gone to treatment.
Just traditional, what we would think of
Treatment.
traditionally as treatment.
Yeah, treatment. A guy with a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, treatment. Yes.
Kind of curious, a lot of like mental health disorders you talk about are treated with narcotics, right?
No.
What
They're
about
treated with
attention-
drugs, but not with narcotics.
What about like attention genesis disorder? Isn't that treated like?
A narcotic is an opiate.
What? It's
A
an opiate?
narcotic is an opiate.
So Ativan and benzos aren't considered a narcotic,
No.
even though they're treated in rehabs?
Isn't there one?
Even though they're treated in rehabs?
Yeah, no. I mean,
But they're
am I
not
missing
considered a
something?
narcotic.
Yeah,
Our insurance programs consider them narcotics.
Yeah.
We're gonna go through treatment.
There are different classes of drugs. Among the drugs of abuse are the opiates, so the oxys and Percocets and all of that kind of stuff. Those are typically used to treat pain. Benzodiazepines, Ativan, that kind of stuff is typically treated in the mental health world to treat an anxiety disorder. But some of what you're talking about and some of what we're starting to do now is say there are individuals with complicated mental health conditions who do benefit from psychotropic medications, so that would be in a class of antidepressants, medications that manage bipolar illness, so lithium and Seroquel, those types of things. But the thing is, that class of drugs, that antidepressant class, the class of drugs that treat true mental health conditions, not that an anxiety disorder isn't a mental health condition, that antidepressant class, it doesn't produce a euphoric effect. It moderates or recalibrates a deficiency in brain chemistry.
You can't get high on it.
Yeah, you don't get high on it.
Okay.
You know? But there are lots of different kinds of drugs that do lots of different kinds of things. And opiates, I don't know what the center you're talking about is doing. But, yeah, probably being treated with a lithium or Seroquel, which is a medication, Adderall, another medication that's appropriate to treat antidepressant.
And don't a lot of people abuse that? And I feel like I've seen.
Well, abuse potential and getting higher.
Yeah. Lithium has low abuse potential, Seroquel has low abuse potential, Adderall has abuse potential. And so a good care provider would say, do you have a history of substance use disorder? You know, oh, well, Adderall probably would be appropriate, let's try one of these other ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A good care provider, but not all care providers are good. The PhD can say that.
To get to my question though, it was just people that recover that have maybe those mental health issues, do they remain on those prescriptions through their recovery?
Yes.
Do they do? Okay, so
Well-
they're trying to just keep everything out of their system.
Well, now that is, I have to be careful here because I don't know nearly as much about drugs as anyone else in the room, but there is a thing that AA has called Without Doctors, where they basically say, we deal with alcoholism. Now, you know Bill and Bob, I think it was Bill who died, he was on anti-anxiety medication.
Yeah, I think so. He experimented with a number of other ones.
Like LSD as well.
Yes. Which I heard works.
Yes, I'm sure it does. So I think there is, I hope, if I say anything wrong, I want somebody to correct me now, but there is nothing in the AA conference approved literature that says that you lose your chips if you're taking mental health medication for mental health prescribed purposes. Right?
Right.
Right. Okay. Now, there are people who choose to believe that, which is unfortunate because you have people in recovery from mental health problems, also recovery from drug and alcohol, which are poorly diagnosed individuals, who are, depending upon the culture of their local AA meeting or group, are kept out of AA or NA because people tell them, well, you got to stop taking that shit. And that's just not an AA opinion, you know. And unfortunately, it's very prevalent. I mean, it's something that happens a lot. You also have people who, I've had friends in recovery who have almost chosen to not get surgery that they needed because they thought that if they got anesthesia or they eventually were on pain medication, they were going to lose their recovery, which is also not true, right? Yes? Correct. So, yes, if somebody needs an anti-anxiety medication for the rest of their life, and they can still be, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they can still be in recovery from drug and alcohol problems because they're not taking the anxiety medication. Imagine that it was insulin instead of the anxiety medication, right? Would they lose their recovery because they need insulin every day? Okay, so, right? Same here.
I have a friend I just helped him get into rehab.
You just have a friend
And
as well?
he's literally coming off of benzos. He's been on them for 8 years.
Okay.
And my understanding is you're not even supposed to be on those for more than 2. And I mean, he's had the worst time possible. I mean, he freaked out. I mean, the whole works. I mean, attempted suicide. You know, I mean, what are the alternatives to that? You know, I mean, are you expected to stay on these things? They are addictive because he literally takes more than what is necessary.
This is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, so I have a
I'm
professional,
sorry.
I have a professional hat that I can wear to answer that, but I'm not gonna put on my professional hat. My A member hat is, I have experience with similar, all right? And what I know from my experience is that individuals who have come to me and said, Sean, I've got a problem, you know, and I've got a problem, and my problem is A, B, or C, and it's typically around a mental health condition or may have been a surgery. Now, my personal experience around surgery for a physiological condition is that I had the privilege of hearing a guy named DuPont speak years ago. And DuPont said, I did some research a few years ago on individuals who were had a 12-step orientation, rigid abstinence only. What I observed with those individuals who had been treated for a legitimate medical condition is that individuals who refused medication and tried to do it without had a higher incidence of full relapse than individuals that took medication as prescribed for the period of time that it was prescribed. Okay, it just made sense to me because what ends up happening, I've heard so often among guys that I sponsor in particular, is that I got behind the pain, and so I took 3 when I should have only taken 1. And what ended up happening is I got high. And once I got high, I was off to the races, which validated the point that DuPont was making, that people under-medicate and then to catch up, they over-medicate. They over-medicate, they have a euphoric experience, and they're off to the races. Okay? The other, and this is also my parent experience as a man in recovery, is that I ain't a doctor. Okay? I ain't a doctor. I may have personal experience with the drug, and I got a guy that I sponsor. Guy's a really smart guy, he's a PhD. Got sober when he was young. Got sober in his early 20s, PhD, molecular something now. I can't even pronounce what he does. So anyway, 15 years sober, he's very athletic, ends up getting injured, and starts taking pain medication. Takes it as prescribed, but it was so easy. Okay? And then hurt himself again. And then found himself in situations where he would get an ache or a creak here, and he had some pills left over, and so he self-prescribed. Okay? And then he was off to the races. Okay? So what I say to the guys that I sponsor is that you go talk to this doctor, because I know they know our problem, and they will subscribe, they will take your history, and they will prescribe appropriately, and they will monitor you appropriately. No. So that's what I do in my sponsorship relationship with guys. No. But I ain't a doc. No. I tell them to go and do what the doc says. Tell them the whole story and do exactly what the doc says.
I apologize for asking that. This person also has an alcohol problem, and when he was trying, he went to the alcohol. So,
Yep.
and he'll be coming to us soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will welcome him with open arms, because that's what we do.
I am actually on all those drugs you mentioned. So, and I noticed that it actually helps me with my sobriety. The Ritalin, I take Ritalin, I'm on the highest dosage, and it just keeps me focused. And my psychologist told me that she's going to monitor that, and she said it could make me relapse, and I let her know that I have a sponsor, so she just said to call my sponsor if I have those relapse. So, you know, and I was actually on all benzos before, but if you don't see your right psychiatrist, they'll help you through that and get you off all the benzos. I was taking 1 milligram Max 3 times a day for my anxiety, and right now I'm taking 600 milligrams of Cerebral at night just to help me sleep. But she monitors those, so if you get a right doctor and the right psychiatrist and tell them your problems, and they'll help you through that and get you feeling better. And you know, with the medications that I'm on, it helps with my sobriety. I just picked up my 30-day trip about a week ago, and I'm on 60 days right now, so it helps me with my sobriety. It makes me keep focused on that straight line so that I don't relapse.
Yep. So, another personal story is, so a number of years ago, I get insurance and I go to find a primary care doc and I tell the doc my story. And she says, "You've been sober how long?" I said, "Yeah, I got sober when I was 16, and I was probably about 12, 15 years sober at the time." And she said, "You got sober when you were 16? And she says, "Oh, that was a phase." And I'm like, and I said, "Oh, really, in your professional opinion?" And she says, "Yes." And I said, "Well, we won't be seeing each other again." Because I want a doc who, when I share that precious piece of information, I want them to know exactly what it means and what I expect in their care of me. Now, so, God bless you and thank you for sharing.
And if you also see a therapist on the side, they also help you experience all the feelings and everything with the medication. So if you do both, then it'll help you tremendously.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you've had your hand up a number of times.
Oh, no big deal. Like, I was just wondering what, kind of changing topic, but what area or like, I guess, country or region globally is like the most, I guess, friendly or progressive in this field, in the field of recovery? I mean, I guess on a governmental level as well as just attitude of the people and stuff like that. Would you say?
That's a really nice question.
Well, I'm losing there, so.
Different countries have different drugs of abuse. Like Australia, for example, has their main problem is opiate. Russia, I can tell you categorically, without any hesitation, that Russia is the most unfriendly country because methadone is illegal and people die and they don't care. Thailand is close second, so I know the bottom country. I think, believe it or not, with the setup that we have now, with the drug policy guy being openly gay in recovery, not that the openly gay thing matters, but I mean he's a very open person in general, is what I'm saying. And everybody in the drugs office is being openly in recovery, and hopefully the problem, we have the most recovery-friendly setup in DC now that we can ever have. The problem is, of course, that Congress makes it such that it takes years to do anything. You know, when a friend of mine was drug czar for a short time, he created the recovery branch in the White House. That was in February 2009, and Peter's office was not created by Congress until September 2010, right? So, and then he doesn't have a budget or a staff, right? So it's more like a Queen of England kind of thing where he inaugurates and he cuts ribbons and he's president, but he can't really do very much. But it's a good start. So we have a very recovery-friendly policy team right now. I think that the signing of the ACA 2010 healthcare reform and the Parity Act that Patrick Kennedy and his father were able to sign are two things that are going to transform healthcare over time, because the parity says that health insurance has to provide as much coverage for mental health and behavioral health, including substance use, as it does over the lifetime for physical and surgical care, which is amazing. And healthcare reform is believed to bring between 28 and 38 million more people to have insurance, 6 to 8 million of whom are estimated to have a drug and alcohol problem. So hopefully, if we have that going, given that we have the recovery orientation framework now, and we're starting to recognize, because of healthcare reform is really, by the way, a chronic care model, where they recognize that people with a chronic disease usually have more than one. So I have a study that it's in the handout, but I didn't show it to you because it would have taken too long, that shows that the majority of people in recovery have not only the addiction chronic condition in their past, but over 50% of them have one or more chronic physical condition, as well as 2/3 of them also have a chronic mental health condition. And healthcare reform is a model whereby people with multiple chronic conditions are, of course, the most expensive to the nation. We're starting to get hip to the fact that this stuff costs money. So even if they don't care about the individuals' lives, they care about money because the federal budget is not that good right now, and it's not going to look any better soon. So people are starting to realize that we need to save money. Healthcare reform was written and implemented with the goal of improving services and decreasing costs. So I think that, as my friend Tom McLennan has said several times ago with drugs are, we're going to have to be able to capitalize on a crisis. We have a budget crisis because healthcare is costing more and more and more and more, and it's not going to change because of the cost of lawsuits, basically, and the cost of medical school in America. I went to medical school in France for free. Here you come out and you're like $250,000 in debt at 25 or 27. So that's not good. But healthcare reform is going to do an enormous amount for addiction recovery because by default, for fiscal reasons, if not for humanitarian reasons, they're going to have to treat a chronic condition as a chronic condition, and that's a recovery-based model. So that's good.
We need to wrap.
We're going to wrap. Anybody wants to wrap?
They've got to start the next meeting, so thank you very much.